Yes, yes, yep, she is, yep. Okay, so basically the format, so this is new for me, awesome. Well, good, I'm really excited to see this and not have it be so like,
You know, like hiking or something?
Oh, next to something like that.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you want the other, the stuff there, I can get you back to that. Ordinance and everything. Yeah, that was actually, sorry.
So I teach my travel classes here, and they use Google Docs, and all you do is upload all your stuff to it, and it goes to everything. Oh, it's really cool. But I had to teach me how to do that.
I had to do Google Docs for GC West.
These are like long pictures already used, and all of it is already
I was in a panic because they didn't get instructions today, so
perfect. I mean, depending on where it's not.
So I saw my husband picking up the kids on the way from the village, and so they were waving in the video. I'm sorry. Mommy,
Hello, we get to hang out again. I'm checking out the IT guys in front of me. Got the setup. I'm like, it's impressive, like for real. Like I am super impressed. And you run it through a laptop and camera.
Yeah.
You're like those travel bloggers. I love their videos. I will never be one of them.
Okay, good evening. We will call this meeting to order at 6:01, the Cherry Capital Airport Joint Zoning Commission meeting agenda. Thank you. Of June 24th, and if you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Winter, Ms. Wolf.
Here.
Report.
Okay, we have in front of us our agenda for June 24th. Do I have any changes or a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I will support.
Okay, we have a motion and support. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. And next we have the regular meeting minutes from the May 13th,
Oh, we
2020.
got first public.
Oh, I'm sorry. Skipped over public comment. So this is an opportunity for public comment. We will also, as a part of the public hearing, include an opportunity for public comment related to the zoning ordinance that's before you. So everything that's a part of the public hearing will be entered into the official record, but we also have the opportunity for you to provide any additional comments at this time. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we will move on to the meeting minutes of the Joint Zoning Commission. So that's the regular meeting of May 13th, 2026. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes, or do I have a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2026 Joint Zoning Commission meeting.
I'll support even though my name is spelled wrong one time. The rest of it is right.
We make that change. So we have a motion with the change to list his name.
In item D, it says Linde will.
Okay, so two locations, or just one location? Okay. We've got a motion with the change, with support. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. We have our approved minutes. Okay, so now we will move on to the public hearing on the proposed airport zoning ordinance. And so we will officially call the public hearing to order, and we will begin with a presentation from staff with Bob Nelson.
Thank you very much. If you can't hear me, let me know. But we'll, once we get to that point, we'll hold on to that. So thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to do a presentation tonight focused more on the ordinance itself. Back in February, we did a pretty deep dive into a lot of the background information, all the laws, history, all that sort of stuff. So this is going to be more focused on the ordinance itself tonight. So we'll give you that, just a little bit of that background, and then come back for the ordinance in kind of article by article. And I did get a clarification from the chair. We're going to wait till the end for questions. So if you do have questions, just jot them to yourself, and we'll tackle them at the end of the presentation. So again, why are we here? What are we talking about? We're here as a complement to local zoning, not to replace or anything. It's going to be an overlay that supplements existing zoning in each of the zoning jurisdictions that are present today. The other thing that we have in the fundamental premise of the ordinance is safety. We're here for the safety of the flying public as well as those on the ground. And then last but not least, we're creating a process, and this ordinance is the first step of which we're going to be providing clear guidelines to everyone with respect to development. Again, going back in time, all of what we're talking about today were laws that were originally, especially on the federal side, established back in 1950. There were state laws, again, all with respect to airport zoning, established back into 1950. The one biggest change that happened was in 2001, where the state of Michigan actually froze, if you will, zoning with respect to compatibility with state law. So at that point in time, anything within municipal zoning regulations could not become less compliant with state law. So that was effective in 2001. And what we're trying to do here is, given some of that history and time and incongruities that we're currently seeing, we're trying to create this ordinance to create essentially a legal pathway for all those non-conforming issues to become conforming, thereby avoiding hopefully a lot of legal limbo, so to speak, with the various issues that may occur in the community. The community. So. Again, the bases, first one is the FAA, so that's Part 77, and that's primarily focused on height. There are some other things in there like landfills and other things that are also regulated, but primarily height is the issue governed under the federal statutes. And then they also have, so in addition to things like landfills, right, they don't want upward pointing lights or other things that could distract pilots. Again, same thing with animal hazards to flight, especially birds, that sort of thing. And then going into the state law a little bit more, it's all about land use directly adjacent to the airport with respect to quality of life. So some of the issues, of course, we've seen a couple different things crop up, and it's been the topic of discussion is how there's some disconnects between where we are today and that existing state law. And then one of the things that we wanted to keep reminding folks is, again, we have this incongruity with state law, but something like the case study that we have here with Tebow Forest is exactly why we're here today. It was something that was not legal under state law, and we worked with the developers there and Elisa to create the correct parameters to allow that development to occur, even though by state law it was an illegal, non-conforming use. So with that, I'm going to touch on a couple things. Height restrictions is the first kind of part of the ordinance, and then land use regulations follow through, and then just talk a little bit about some flight safety hazards as it pertains to the ordinance. Again, just trying to talk about our process to date. We as the Joint Zoning Commission have been meeting since November of 2024, and then again just had that in-depth review back in February. So we're here today to review the ordinance that we've been working on for that time. So this map here shows you the area that was defined by the Michigan Office of Aeronautics, actually the Michigan Aeronautics Commission, as the hazard area around the Cherry Capital Airport. And it's a 10 nautical mile radius. So all of the townships that you can see here up into Leelanau, and then over to Acme and Whitewater to the east, and then Blair and Curtis to the south, up into Peninsula to the north. So again, what does this kind of mean in terms of height? Well, we're looking at what they call the infamous upside down wedding cake. As you can imagine, and as you can kind of see by the diagrams here, as an aircraft approaches a runway, they're coming in and they want to have increasing buffers as they get lower to the ground for safe flight. So that is what brings us to kind of a little article by article breakdown of the ordinance itself. We begin with the purpose, which more or less I just explained to you. One of the things that will happen, they exist today, the Joint Zoning Board. The Joint Zoning Board is what actually appointed and set up the Joint Zoning Commission. That zoning board will be the entity that on an ongoing basis is the proprietor and holder of this ordinance on a go-forward basis. It also kind of clearly outlines those permit requirements. And then as we get into section 2, there are definitions on things like development. So understanding if you're just doing a little bit of a fix to something, or are you changing 80% or more of a particular structure or building. Again, we talked about height, and again, height is defined in various ways within the various jurisdictions around here, but with respect to this ordinance, it's actually the height above mean sea level to the topmost portion of the development. So it's not just how many stories is it, it's not floors or other things. If you have say 3 stories, but you have a 30-foot tall antenna, again, the height that will be governed under this is that topmost point above mean sea level. So a slightly different definition than other codes. And then, of course, identifies my position, the airport engineer of the Cherry Capital Airport, as the zoning administrator. Use regulations. So there are, again, just getting back into the basics, those things that are a hazard to air navigation, primarily height, are covered under federal statutes, which are then mirrored into this ordinance. And the same thing with the land use zones. All those things are established by state law and then mirrored into the ordinance. More on Article 3 here. So again, this airport hazard area district, again, that's going to be that big 10 nautical mile area radius. We talked about, again, landfills, outward directed lighting, again, height requirements, and those things, electrical interference. So often already see a lot of cell towers and that sort of stuff that come across my desk, kind of regardless. A lot of the communication companies already know that this is something that they have to do. So what does that look like? There are maps around. Again, we've got some maps at the library. I would actually encourage folks who can use their computer. It's easy to go in on your computer on like a PDF viewer. You can zoom in if you want to see more detail. But this is something that is created as part of the airport's layout plan. It's our Part 77 contour plan. It is reviewed and approved by the FAA. So it's not just something that we can make up willy-nilly. It's all, again, according to those federal rules about how each of those lines are established and then approved by the FAA. So just given the area that is covered, we have one sheet here that covers the west approach. This particular sheet also covers the north and south approaches. And then the second page here is the east approach. So those are the height contours that define the height restrictions and permitting requirements. During that process, especially going back in time, one of the concerns was, well, what does that mean? So we provided this before, we're showing it here again. What this is showing is this purple limit in these various areas are 100 feet tall, which means anything in the gray area, 100 feet tall, which is greater than most jurisdictions even allow, wouldn't need a permit. So that's one of the big takeaways. We're really focused in on those areas directly adjacent to the airport itself, and then, of course, as we get out into Holiday Hills and a little bit to the south here, right, we've got that rising ground as we get into the Bay Basin. So as we get, again, to the south and again out here to the west and actually out here further towards Long Lake, there's a couple places that we need to start looking at those elevations as they get above 100 feet. So we also talked about our land use zone districts. Again, as I referred, the state law frozen as of 2001 with respect to compatibility. And then in terms of how they were even essentially manufactured, so to speak, by the state of Michigan and brought into state law was based upon some national precedents for similar regulations used within the United States. So this isn't just something that was dreamt up, so to speak, by the state of Michigan. This is something that is being used nationally for airport land use guidelines. So again, just to kind of cover the areas that are included in the exhibits in the ordinance, we have the areas directly surrounding the airport itself, which is called Zone 5. As you get off of each of the runway ends, there are zones, Zone 1. As you get a little bit further out in each of the runway ends, there's a Zone 2. And then adjacent to that is more of that pie shape. That pie shape is that Zone 3. And then we have an extended center line on each of the approaches, which is zone 4. And all of those dimensions, again, are dictated under state statute based upon formulas, runway lengths, and all that sort of stuff. So what do each of those zones mean? Again, if you can imagine being right off the end of the runway, we really don't want to have people. So residential uses specifically are prohibited, and again, trying to find those relatively unoccupied, non-frequently traveled type of uses. So a storage facility is one of the items that could potentially be considered compatible. Zone 2, as you get, again, a little bit further out into the approach, again, we're still trying to restrict density, very similar restrictions overall, but there are, I'll say, a few more provisions with respect to what's allowable in, we'll say, the fine print. And then zone 3, which again kind of comes into that pie shape or that splay, that's where we start to get into allowable areas for low density residential. And this is the case of Tebow Forest. Tebow Forest and the apartments that were constructed were in this zone 3. It's considered obviously a higher density development. So we worked through that variance process, if you will, to provide the ability to meet that zone 3 need and still allow the apartments to be constructed. Zone 4, again, that's that extended runway center line. Again, identifying even greater densities being permitted. It is the case that the preference there is, again, high density things, school stadiums, daycare facilities, and that sort of stuff that are new in nature would not be permitted uses. Any existing items, whether it's a mobile home park, which is true at runway 10, or even there's a corner of the school parking lot for Traverse City High on the east side, none of those uses are affected by this ordinance. Those are all grandfathered in. And then zone 5, again, is, again, you're right next to the airport and the runways there. Again, trying to limit the amount of occupancy there. The other thing I was trying to mention there. I'll come back to it. It's primarily aviation uses, and currently most of that area is actually already owned by the airport. Moving on to Article 4, we define what a non-conforming use is, with respect to the definitions. So structures, trees, or land uses not meeting ordinance requirements, but again, are still allowed to continue. So if you have an existing non-conforming use, it is grandfathered in until there are change conditions, whether that's physical modification of something, growth, other things that would change the condition as of the time of the ordinance. So then we get into, even if we do have a non-conforming use, you can either get a permit for that non-conforming use or seek for an exception or variance in order to continue with either the structure, trees, what have you. And then there are provisions in here. Again, non-conforming use can be eliminated if it's abandoned or there's destruction. So if thought would be to completely rebuild a facility from scratch, that rebuilt facility would have to be in conformance. There would be no exceptions or variances to a change of use in particular. So if you wanted to go from residential to residential, that would be considered maintaining that non-conforming use. If you wanted to change from residential to commercial, that would be one of those things where it would not be permitted under the ordinance. again, there's always a process. These are the rules, but we always know there are places for exceptions and variances. So the ordinance has been constructed to try and provide as flexible a standard as possible. We still need strict compliance for safety purposes, but again, we're trying to provide something that we can, again, accommodate development within the context of still providing safety. When we look at variances, one of the things that we note is that economic hardship in and of itself is not sufficient justification for grounds for a variance. You'll need other matters to be part of that application for a variance. Again, you can't compromise safety as any part of that or anything with respect to airport operations, but we can evaluate within a safety study those things that would help us accomplish that safety compliance with a variance application. There's also been some talk about mitigation conditions, and I think these are things that will be developed in greater detail moving forward. But again, when we talk about lighting, there's a lot of like zero cutoff fixtures. When it comes to trees, we can talk about trimming as opposed to completely cutting. And then things like wildlife management, again, there's different ways we can talk about how to deal with bird attractants, and the like within the area. Article 5 gets into administration and enforcement. Again, myself as the administrator, and then it is the case that there are civil infractions for non-compliance. Again, hoping to work with all of the zoning jurisdictions and applicants to get to compliance to avoid this, but it is there to help prevent any potential issues and, again, provide a firm hand if needed for any non-compliance. Again, the general intent and goal will always be to work with people to avoid any sort of fines and what have you, but there is an ultimate red line, so to speak, that will come with respect to safety in particular. Article 6, Board of Appeals. Again, this is the process by which someone needs to appeal a determination made by myself in my office. The Joint Zoning Board of Appeals will exist. In that particular case, the Joint Zoning Board, so this is the Zoning Commission, the Zoning Board will appoint a separate 5-member board with staggered 3-year terms. There's also mechanisms for alternates in there for each of those members. And then those things can then come to this Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance. So practical difficulty, again, unnecessary hardship, we have to do with safety, provide substantial justice, and probably primarily to me, one of the things, it's got to be within the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish with respect to safety and still complement what's trying to be accomplished within the community. A little bit more, these are just more administrative articles, but Article 7 incorporates the FAA regulations, severability, legalese if something gets struck, the rest of the stuff still applies. Again, provisions for amendments, reservation in there, Article 10 for future use, and then Article 10 being the ultimate effective date of the ordinance when adopted. We've had this up for a while, but just for anyone who doesn't know, we do on the airport's website, under the planning and zoning, we do have a fair amount of information. It's actually under the Cherry Capital Airport Zoning Board link, where we have, again, the ordinance exhibits, and other information about where we stand with the ordinance. And with that, I will turn it back to Chair Kerner.
Well, thank you. So I want to give an opportunity, if anyone has specific questions related to the content, feel free to ask questions now. After the questions have been answered, answered, we're gonna open up the official, public hearing to enter comments into the record, but did wanna, provide the opportunity to, if you have any questions for Bob based on the presentation content.
My question is, does the airport have like a 5-year, 10-year, 20, 25-year plan? And is that published for the public to see in terms of, how big it expects to become or anyway, relevant information like that?
Yep. On the airport website, there is the airport layout plan, which identifies the future development of the airport. In answer to your one question, the runway ends as they are not expected. There are no plans for the runway ends to change at this time. So, hopefully that answers your question. The four corners of the airport in terms of the property are not anticipated to change.
I find that impossible to believe, but go ahead.
So, maybe to help that a little bit, so with the aircraft that are here today that would use our airport, we can, if it ever even got to that, we could access Europe or the West Coast out of Traverse City today with the runway length that we have. So that's, beyond that is not foreseeable.
Could you please explain to us the impact on Leelanau County and their involvement in this process and impact on them?
I can. Leelanau County is more in the conditional area of the map. Again, the land use zones are more centered around the airport itself. Leelanau County is in this outer corner of that 10 nautical mile radius, so they'll primarily be considered with any potential height regulations. We've been actually in touch with the zoning administrators out here a number of times with questions for various developments, even tall hotels, that sort of thing, and none of those have triggered, even based upon the ordinance, they wouldn't have triggered a permit. Yep.
Does the zoning ordinance have any requirements for sound insulation? And when was the most recent noise study that you did? And have you done a noise study that forecasts sound issues going out into the future? And do you anticipate changes to zoning requirements for sound insulation? First question.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I got the noise part. What was the first part of that, though? Forgive me.
The last time?
Are there any zoning requirements for sound insulation?
Thank you. So, are there zoning requirements? There's nothing in the ordinance about that. However, for instance, like in the case of what we did in Tebow Forest, that was one of the mitigations that was offered up. Again, the idea being you don't want to have someone without, for instance, air conditioning have to open up their window and listen to noise. So one of the things we said is, hey, how about we have well-insulated glass windows to keep out that noise, and then because your windows are going to be shut, let's make sure they have air conditioning so that space can be conditioned and not rely on outside air. So those were some of the mitigations that we took to allow that to go through and, again, accommodate the residents who may, and that was one of the other requirements. We're requiring each resident to understand that they're living in a flight path. So, again, those are the sorts of things that we can do in cases like Zone 3.
So when was the most recent sound study, and do you have any forecasts?
So, yep, we did noise study as part of the terminal edition. That was in a CADX. I think that was provided to you. But long story short, yes, there was an analysis done of current time and then forecasted out with noise contours for and around the airport.
Okay, that's going to be interesting because that was not included in my FOIA response. The next question, is there anything in the FAA regulations that prevents a sidewalk on the Garfield Road portion right at the end of the runway?
Yes. So under FAA regulations, the runway protection zone is protected and requires FAA approval in order for that to go in. So I actually worked with the city just this past year to actually conduct the study to allow that to occur. So that, I believe, has been bid out and is anticipated to be constructed this fall.
Okay.
Okay.
And I may be asking the same question you answered back here. From zone 4 to the 10 miles, does this zoning ordinance, how does this zoning changes impact that area? And the other question was, what's the impact to existing everything, whether it be a natural or building, conforming or non-conforming, based on these, your proposals?
Sure. So, yep, outside of that land use zone area, which is really that mandatory permitting area, we get into something where we take the FAA's tool, which is online.
200 feet.
No, not necessarily. So that's why I'm saying we utilize that FAA tool, and that's what we put in the ordinance. So you go into the tool and you identify where you are and the height of what you want to construct. And you hit a button, it computes it and tells you whether or not you need to apply for a permit or not. So that's an existing FAA tool to help you understand. And it's really, once you're outside of that land use zone area, it really is all of a height regulation. And just because it says, hey, you need to submit something, doesn't necessarily mean it'll need to be permitted either. Again, it's all based upon the FAA regulation. They have certain, what they call, it's a notification surface versus a permitting surface. So we and the FAA require notification about certain things that are covered under that tool, but in terms of what actually needs to be permitted is a slightly less strict surface.
So how do the cell towers and things like that impact that are within that area?
Yep. So again, they always do the same process. They go through that tool, they hit submit, and if they're required to submit, they typically, in the case of cell towers specifically, they're actually required by the FAA under a separate piece because they're actually doing electronic transmissions. They always have to submit. So all the communications folks are very well aware that they have to submit for that process.
How about a windmill?
That's actually a big thing within the whole industry. That actually gets into a whole specialized section of the FAA. They obtain permits for wind turbines in particular.
I just wanted to try to get a study on the top of a hill that's out that way. And I'm wondering if they're ever going to put wind. If this would get in the way. It's in there.
Yeah, well, so again, this is all of the regulations that we're talking about exist today. They've existed since 1950. So no new regulations. All we're doing is trying to figure out a way, especially as it gets closer into the airport, if we can figure out ways to do some variances where safety permits. So those, again, all these regulations, all the height stuff that we're talking about exist today. So that's covered. And I'm sure if the tribe submitted any sort of application for something like that, that would have triggered with any of their consultants on that. So to answer your second question, which is what changes? So the ordinance says everything as it exists today becomes a legal non-conforming use. So nothing changes as of day one. If any changes occur, again, growth, other things, we get into step 2. But as of the date of the ordinance, there's nothing that indicates there would be any changes. That was the intent, to grandfather things in as of day one. Again, residential uses can remain, all that sort of stuff. So no changes are required.
Admittedly, when I saw the restriction on population, 5 people and all that, and didn't understand the zoning, I didn't see how they fit together. You've made that clear.
Okay, thank you.
Another question.
Yep.
I live near Munson, so there's helicopters that are regularly flying around rescuing people, I hope, and doing all sorts of other good things. I already know that the Cherry Festival and the air show they like to do apparently is going to be affected by some of these rules, and maybe we won't be able to have it in the future, maybe we will, but how is it going to affect the Coast Guard and the rescue helicopters that are pretty active every summer?
There are no impacts.
No impacts at all?
No impacts by this ordinance. Nope. Those are all aviation related rules, yeah. So everything going into the hospital, everything with the air show, all that is aviation regulations. There's no bearing on
Because
the
we're
zoning
seeing
ordinance.
bigger planes come out over the bay. Normally, I would have thought they would have stayed east-west, on the airport runway. But, I see them peeling off to the north sometimes now and probably peel off to the south. But none of that's going to interfere with...
None of that has, with any bearing with respect to ordinance.
Very well.
Yep.
Thank you for the presentation. Let's say I live in Zone 2.
Okay.
And I've got a house and a garage. Let's say it's a 2-story house in Zone 2. And let's say my house burns down.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through what I have to do to rebuild my house?
Yep. So you would apply, and because that's within the mandatory permitting area, that would be something that you'd have to apply for. In that particular circumstance, because that was an existing use, and assuming that you build to the same height or less, that would be an approved use.
Okay, so then how does the March 28th, 2000 date come into play?
Yep,
Right,
so
right.
that freezes zoning as of that date. So let's say, so for instance, the city did make some adjustments to its zoning standards recently in terms of increasing density. What state law actually says is it preempts that with respect to the land zones. So in any case where additional density was added into the city land use zones within these existing state land use zones, the state law actually preempts that and actually considers those illegal.
So in that case, just to help me understand it, let's say the density in Zone 2 in my neighborhood, let's say next to the Civic Center, right? It's a Zone 2, it's right in that area. The density far exceeds, or mildly exceeds, the 25 houses per, I think it's 25 in Zone, no, it's 5.
It's actually, I think in zone 2 it's less than 5.
It's not, residential is not an allowed use, right, in Zone 2?
Again, if you're creating a new one,
Okay.
no.
So could I, so let's say the city zoning allows me in Zone 2 to build an ADU because of zoning. Can I build an ADU under airport zoning?
I think there might be a variance process by which that could be acceptable. Again, when you're considering the density, I think where, again, if you're talking about the difference between one family household unit or 2 family household units in a single spot is a lot different than saying, hey, I want 40 there now. I think that's the difference that we're trying to get at there.
So, just so I understand, there's no residential use allowed in Zone 2. Any additional residential uses in Zone 2 would further exacerbate the density, right? Because right now it's 5 people, but those are not residents. I'm not quite sure how you can have 5 homeless people? I don't know, right? What does that mean?
Again, we mirrored the federal standards, so
right, but regardless,
yeah.
Is it my understanding that we can further exacerbate the density by building new ADUs in Zone 2? If
You
local
could
zoning
propose it
wasn't-
under a variance.
You
Yes.
could request it,
You could request it under a variance.
but it's not a non-conforming use, right?
It would be a non-conforming use. That would need a variance.
The ADU doesn't exist.
Right, because that would be new, and you'd be changing more than 80%. If you're essentially doubling that footprint, it's more than an 80% change. So at that point, it's not to say you couldn't do it, but you would have to apply for a variance. And at least I can foresee a path from getting to a single-family residential unit to a residential unit with an ADU as a possible way. Again, everything from windows, air conditioning, all these sorts of things. Notification to residents, what have you. I think there's a path there. What we would have a greater safety significance there, again, is taking that single-family dwelling unit and turning that into a 30-apartment complex, that's where we start to get into that life safety issue in terms of increasing density.
So you don't see it as a safety issue to increase the density in zone 2 for a single ADU use only for a significant, right?
Well, again, under the ordinance, I'm saying by the ordinance, it is considered a safety issue. I'm saying someone could choose to apply to a variance and understand that they're taking on essentially something outside of the ordinance, that they would have to understand that they're operating outside of the ordinance.
But you don't think that's a barrier to getting a variance in the first place?
In terms of the specific case of the EDU, no.
So to tag on to that conversation, there has been property in that particular neighborhood that someone has split up and sold. So you're saying that those new lots cannot build a new house without going through this process for approval?
I would say those doing that have put themselves in legal jeopardy.
Okay.
Because that's an existing state law. The only way to allow that development to occur under state law would actually be to adopt this ordinance and have them apply for a variance.
So until it's adopted, and if they started before, there's a gray area.
There is legal jeopardy there,
Okay.
yes.
And to add buildings to existing property, same issue? Like if you don't have a garage and want to add a garage, any building? Or are you just talking property that adds people?
Primarily, I mean, primarily that which adds people. It's one of those things where if you have a 25-foot tall house and you want to add a 12-foot garage, that's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to come back to me and say, I have a 25-foot tall house, but I want a 40-foot tall garage, different story.
But do you still have to apply?
If
building
you're in the
new.
land use, if you're in that mandatory area,
Yep,
yes.
you still have to apply.
Yeah,
Okay.
you would still have to apply.
To follow on Commissioner Andrews' questions about what happens if a house burns down, do these zoning restrictions and non-conforming uses change how an insurance company would value a structure for payout in the event of a total loss?
Not any more so than they do today because it's an existing state law.
Yes. I wasn't gonna make a comment, but now I am. I am the only person that has been through this process with the Cherry Capital Airport. So I wanted to say that it's successful. I'm the Deputy Director for Traverse City Housing Commission. I am part of the development team that built Parkview Senior Apartments. We are the exciting example that is used there. This is an apartment complex with 46 units for senior citizens that make $0 a year, up to about 60% AMI, depending on it. So it's extremely low-income individuals. And we built a building that was in a zone with existing state law. And because this ordinance wasn't adopted yet, and because we didn't have the process to apply for a variance, we worked with Bob and Carrie, the attorney for the airport, and we came up with mitigation things that we could do. And today, if you drive by, I think it's a gorgeous building. I'm pretty proud of the work I put into it. It was 5 years of my life, and we now have 46 seniors that are housed and paying anywhere from $0 to about $300 a month to live there. And that all happened working with the airport. And if we were able to make that happen, I mean, I think everybody could stretch their brain to come up with hypotheticals, like what if this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But it did happen to me, and the building's there. You can drive by, feel free to apply if any of you are interested. It's full, but we always have a nice waiting list. So I just wanted you guys to know that the process works. But we didn't have the ability to have this ordinance to go back on, and it was a lot of people. My attorney, your attorney, my engineer, your engineer, and now we have a process to go through. And I was so interested in it, I applied and was appointed, and I am the chairman of the Joint Zoning Board for the airport because of this story.
And I wanted to thank you guys. I know 2 of you are missing, but thank you. We chose you to be on this Joint Zoning Commission and kind of didn't really give you an opportunity to say yes or no. So I wanted to say thank you for serving. You're exactly the expertise that we needed for developers like me. I don't think any of you guys want developers writing your ordinances. And we don't want attorneys writing them either. So thank you to the planners for doing that as well. And I just wanted to take a chance to say thank you and say that I'm the example of how the process works. And I know that it will work better once we have an actual ordinance and we're not reinventing the wheel. So I look forward to working with you guys with more developments. I work exclusively in low-income housing, tax credit properties, so that's what we're building. We're not building the multi-million-dollar penthouses that everybody hates. We're housing hundreds of low-income individuals in the city, so that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so I am, thank you for your comments. And I'm going to transition to the public hearing for the, is there one more question?
I don't know how to read Exhibit E. I'm sorry, I don't know how to read Exhibit E. D and E are on the same page. And,
Yep, so you're looking at the airport master record is what that's called, and that's a document developed and defined by the FAA.
you read across these lines?
Yeah. Correct, yeah, we can maybe do a follow-up after, and I can explain it to you a bit more, but.
There is a lot to that thing.
That's like the FAA's data dump about the airport.
Yeah.
Because to me, it should say like the heights, because it refers to heights in the other portion of the ordinance. And I don't see like how many inches or
it's
feet.
Meant for it's meant for a different purpose. It's just really a reference document to kind of define the airport.
Sorry.
Nope, that's fine.
Okay, so now we are going to kind of open the official public hearing to take comments for this draft zoning ordinance. We have 3 comments that we are going to include in the official public record. We received one from Judy Nelson and 2 from Heather Shaw. So we have those emails that were provided to us this evening. So we wanted to take this opportunity. We'll open this up for comments. We will be listening. We'll be recording all of the comments that come in. If you have specific questions, we're not going to get into a dialogue at this time, but we will record all of your questions, and so that we can address those at the end of this public comment period. So Bob will be here available to answer the questions at the end of the public comment period. So this time, if there's specific comments related to that, we'll take those risks and we can pass the microphone around.
Thank you, TJ Andrews, 619 Webster. Thank you for this work. I appreciate that this document is a relatively readable document and appreciate the effort that's gone into it to make it so. A couple of things I want to just point out. One is I understand that the height limits in section 3.1 cross-reference Exhibit E, and when I read Exhibit E, I cannot for the life of me tell what the height limits are in my neighborhood and where I live. I see their contour lines. I took my glasses on, put them on, try to get a microscope. It's really difficult to read. And when I was on your website, there was some reference to some contours that were in a presentation. I think you showed it. If you could help the public understand what the scope of heights are, or at least how to find them, I think it would increase public understanding. The second piece is obviously these laws may have been around for a long time, but obviously this is a new process for our community, and to the extent you can help our community understand what they need to do in very straightforward, simple terms. I understand that the planners on this commission deal in this business on a day-to-day basis. They are used to getting questions like this in their respective townships, and if they can just help the public understand in the most simple terms when they have to apply and what they have to do, because I do think this is going to add some challenges to the community, and the more we can proactively get ahead of that, the better. Thank you.
Bruce Moore, I live in East Bay Township. I think that for both zoning and building codes, you should incorporate sound insulation requirements for new construction based upon proximity to the airport and noise contours. In Texas, we lived in a community that was relatively close to the runways, and people who didn't pay attention to noise contours when they purchased houses really, really regretted it. You should not use the annualized L&D numbers. You should use summer traffic numbers, because the annualized numbers include 9 months of the year when there's very, very little air traffic. And you need to make the sound insulation requirements so that houses are livable in August, when all of the horse show traffic, both private jets and commercial traffic, is coming into the airport. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Going once, going twice? Okay. Well, at this time, we will close the public hearing. And let's go back to my notes. I was planning for it to go quite this quickly. So we have, I'll bring it back to the Joint Zoning Commission. We have two options tonight. We can make a recommendation to the zoning board to take up this zoning ordinance. The zoning board, my understanding, would also hold a public hearing prior to its formal adoption, or we can continue deliberations. So those are the two options. I don't believe there was any specific questions that needed to be addressed at this time. TJ had a comment just about Exhibit E and some confusion on interpreting that.
We can address that comment, I believe. One of the things I would make mention of, and this is in response to a comment from Judy Nelson, I guess I'll call it a staff recommendation under section 1.3 that talks about the administration of the ordinance, and just making it a lot more clear that where feasible, the zoning administrator shall integrate this ordinance with existing jurisdiction permitting processes. And motions could be with that modification. I think that would address, at least with respect to the ordinance language, staff's opinion of any remaining changes that would be needed to the ordinance.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
If we decided to pass this resolution to the other zoning, yes, the zoning board, if they make changes to the draft language, does that get kicked back to us again?
They can either choose to kick it back to you to make additional changes, or if it's like a simple administrative change, I think they have the power to make that change as well. But if they require further deliberation or work on a specific topic, you would still exist, so to speak, to conduct that work.
Thank you.
Yep.
Could you clarify within Ms. Nelson's comments what area you're referencing?
Yep. So it would be on page 2 under duplicative reviews and paperwork burden. There under the FAQs, she noted how the FAQs, again, getting into a bit of a step-by-step process, and then how we identified in the FAQs that applicants should just continue to submit their applications through their local zoning jurisdictions, and that as part of that process, projects will be evaluated for this airport zoning ordinance that way. And so that's for everyone's here, that's actually, I've been working with the various townships to that end of effect already. But she just wanted it very clear and explicit that the intent is not to create a standalone entity and process, but rather that this ordinance would be integrated into each jurisdiction's existing zoning process.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Exhibit E, is there a way to provide that missing of it for us on our GIS on our township website where we have our zoning map? We have the airport approach zones on there. I'm just wondering, is there a way to, I know it's limited in terms of how it was created, but I just wonder if there's a way to kind of have a deeper dive or search through it.
Yes. As it exists right now, I have a GIS tool that I implement for my reviews, and there's a GIS surface with this information, and we can share that layer out to the city and the townships for their use and incorporation into your GIS models. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Do you want to just go through kind of the process, just use one kind of point on the map, maybe in the city as an example, and kind of how the process for identifying what the height limitation is? I think you walked me through that, and it was helpful to better understand what that
So this, for reference, we wanted to provide everyone with the actual permit surface, but regardless of this permit surface, what's going to trigger again is that initial website with the FAA clearance. So even before you get to this surface, you're going to be submitting something to the FAA under that evaluation, that notice criteria tool, and that will trigger something far before you ever needing to worry about, am I in this zone, that sort of thing. All of that will be automatically triggered by the FAA review criteria, and it will require me to do a deeper dive in terms of providing folks with information on what allowable heights are at that specific location. Again, to John's point, we can certainly provide that to the townships and the city as additional information, but that would, again, the FAA actually requires it already. What we're doing is just documenting it as part of the city and township development process. And so, I think I had a conversation earlier today with Judy Nelson. She had some questions about, for instance, like the 8th Street neighborhood. Again, there's existing houses and trees and all those sorts of things. None of those, again, as they exist today, change. What we're looking to do is maintain, if it's a residential use, it stays a residential use. Again, getting back to Commissioner Andrews' comment, we just are trying to avoid going from a residential single-family unit that exists today to a 30, 40, 50 apartment complex right on the center line of the runway. So there are just enough different variations. Again, you need to evaluate ground elevation in addition to structure elevation. All those things are part of that analysis process. So it's a lot of engineer speak for it depends, right? So I will say it's best just to work through the process, and as Elisa said, there's certainly a way to get to it, and certainly a way using the existing zoning processes that people have to use today to just add a few more check boxes to that process. Yep.
Is there any other comments or questions amongst the commission?
I think for me, listening to all the comments and feedback, plus the written comments that we received, it seems like there's only one that actually specifically addresses the text, and that's the administration portion of the 1.3. So in terms of the actual draft document, I don't needed to make any other changes to it. So I think it's something that we could move forward with. I would be comfortable with that reference to 1.3 as an amendment to that. And forwarding it on to the joint zoning board.
Okay, so, so if there is a desire this evening, we could pass, we've got resolution number 2026-01 JZC in front of us, that we could adopt this evening, 4 pages, and it would, kind of provide our, support and recommendation to the, zoning board for approval of this. And as was mentioned earlier, this zoning board would also be conducting a public hearing, seeking input, and would take the opportunity for that. So is there a motion to adopt that resolution with the clarification that the intent is that permitting is integrated into the existing zoning process?
Yes, I'll make the motion for that resolution with that added amendment to it, forwarding it to the joint zoning board.
I'll support you, John. Okay, we have a motion and support. All those in favor? Or actually, this is a
Yes, I was going to say,
resolution, so we
I'll need to
should
do a roll
we should
call.
do a roll call.
So, yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So, support, Ms. Carter,
Support.
Mr. Syke,
Yes.
Mr. Winter, absent. Ms. Wolf,
Yes.
the resolution passes.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you everyone for coming out this evening and for the questions and for the feedback and for staying engaged. And we hope you continue to stay engaged in this process because we will be seeking additional volunteers for our zoning, for the zoning board of appeals as well as continuing this process. So with that, we have G is general public comment. So is there any additional public comment? Nope. Moving on to member comment. Any comments from the members?
Just want to say I'm really comfortable that there's going to be another public hearing at the next level up. So I feel like we're doing what we can over here.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned at 7:04. Thanks, everyone.